Good evening, Mayor Cantor. You may begin.
Thank you so much, Jerida. Good evening, everybody. I want to call the Community Planning and Economic Development Committee to order. We have a really wonderful, exciting item on the agenda today. We have all this. I think this committee is filled with exciting things, but we have some guests today. I'm excited to hear from them. First, I would just want to acknowledge the committee members who are here. I have Councillor Kerrigan here, and I have Councillor Gold here. Also have Deputy Mayor Leon Davidoff, I see. Is there anybody else from the council that I have not recognized? Okay, so I'm going to have a motion to approve the minutes from September 24th, 2021. Is there a motion?
I so move.
It's a motion. Good.
Thank you. Thank you, All right. We have a motion and a second, right? Motion made by Ms. Kerrigan, second, Mr. Gold?
Second.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, all those in favor? Aye, right? Any opposed? Motion carries and the minutes are approved. And so we will go to the next item, which is the West Hartford Climate Emergency Resolution. And Mr. Hart might want to add a little because I know he's been in touch with this group as well. So this is a group that is forming a name. I think the name that they said to me was, now I've lost it, but you can describe it yourself. And these are interested individuals that got together to work on climate. This was a pressing issue, not only to them, but to us. And they have brought forward, they raised this to the town manager. I think they've talked to town staff and to the sustainability. I think they went to the sustainability task force. You guys can address that and are here now to make a recommendation to the council. Matt, would you like to add anything?
I would. Thank you very much, Mayor Cantor. Good evening, everyone. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Good to see you all online this evening. As the mayor explained, we have a committed group of residents that are joining us here this evening to help present this resolution, a climate emergency resolution. They've been working on this for an extended period of time, and as the mayor said, they have had conversations with me and various council members, as well as other advisory boards and commissions around town, and really want to thank them and commend them for their hard work. Zoe, I'm not sure who's taking the lead from the group tonight in terms of making the presentation.
Yeah, I can. Thank you, Matt. So I know that I want you all to introduce yourselves first, and then whoever is going to be taking the lead on it can introduce yourselves. And I will say, for the record, I also have met with the group several times. And again, as Matt said, this has been a long process for them. They've been very committed and working on this prior to the summer, through the summer. And we thank them for their patience. This has been a really challenging 20 months for being in municipal government. And we appreciate everybody's patience on the work that we do and on sometimes how things move along. So who would like to start? Want to start with Zoe, and then we'll go around the table.
Hello, my name is Zoe Weissman, and I am a sophomore at Conard. It's so nice to be here.
I am Arlo Tucker. I am also a sophomore at Conard High School.
I'm Andrew Chang. I'm a senior at Hall High School. Thank you for having us here.
Hi, I'm Karina Chang. I'm a freshman at the College of William and Mary.
Hi. Hi, I'm Isadora. I'm a freshman at Conard. High School. Hi, I'm Isadora. I'm a freshman at Conard. High School.
Hi, I'm Isadora. I'm a freshman at Conard. High School. Hi, I'm Isadora. I'm a freshman at Conard. High School.
Hi, I'm Isadora. I'm a freshman at Conard. High School.
And I am Henry Millward. I'm a math teacher at Tungus Community College and a West Hartford resident.
And finally, hi, my name is Evan Piccioli. I'm a sophomore at Conard High School, and I just wanted to thank you for giving us the time to present here tonight.
Thank you all so much. And so who's going to be the, I don't know if you're going to have multiple people, but somebody I'm imagining is going to take the lead. So
Yes,
Raise
I'll be starting off tonight.
thank you so much. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Commission members of the Community Planning and Economic Development Committee, and to everyone else joining us tonight from home. We thank you for the time you've given us tonight to present our climate emergency resolution. We will first walk through the main points of our resolution and the support we have gathered, and then ask you to forward it to the Town Council for a vote in November.
To introduce us, we are a group of West Hartford residents concerned about the rapidly declining health of our planet. I am Isadora, a freshman at Conard High School. The other members of our group are Arlo, Zoe, and Evan, all Conard sophomores. Andrew, a Hall senior, Karina, a college freshman at William and Mary, and Henry, a math teacher at Tungus Community College.
First, we want to acknowledge that West Hartford is already a leader in climate work. From Mayor Cantor's Climate Protection Award to the Clean Energy Plan passed by the Town Council, our resolution is inspired by and meant to continue this great work.
Now, I would like to summarize the main points of our resolution. First, we would like the town to declare climate change an emergency and establish it as an official town priority. Second, we want West Hartford to create a West Hartford Climate Commission with voting youth representation. As a member of the younger generation, I will inherit this earth, and I believe all of us deserve to have a say in ensuring its protection. The way we see that commission running would start with a few main tasks, like aiding in the implementation of the Clean Energy Commission's 100% clean energy plan to its greatest potential. Third, we would like West Hartford to conduct a greenhouse gas inventory to establish West Hartford's baseline carbon footprint. Only from that can we obtain the data necessary to create accurate and achievable goals moving forward. That information will also be utilized by the Commission to author a climate plan by no later than December 2023 to establish concrete goals and steps to bring West Hartford to net zero emissions by 2050. In addition to the Clean Energy Plan, this plan will tackle climate change in the areas of town waste, energy, transportation, and the built environment. Overall, it will take it more broadly. Fourth, we want West Hartford to endorse a national carbon pricing. To be clear, we do not want this implemented on a town level, but rather for West Hartford to support it on a national level. Fifth, and finally, we want West Hartford to view all the town's actions and activities and legislation through the lens of sustainability and climate change and focus our planning and processes on environmentally friendly options.
Climate emergency resolutions similar to this one have been passed in 29 towns in Connecticut, including Hartford, New Haven, Middletown, and Bloomfield. While drafting a resolution to fit West Hartford's needs, we consulted with Mayor Cantor, Town Manager Hart, Energy Specialist Catherine Deviney, and the Sustainability Task Force. We have also worked closely with West Hartford's Clean Energy Commission. We have the Clean Energy Commission's support for the concept of our resolution, as well as written support from West Hartford's Conservation and Environment Committee. Many town and state organizations have also endorsed our resolution, including the Hall Environmental Club, the Conard Environmental Club, the West Hartford Garden Club, Root to Rise, the Electric Vehicle Club of Connecticut, Blue Earth Compost, Save the Sound, and the University of Hartford Student Government Association Sustainability Committee and Faculty Senate.
In closing, we would again like to thank the Commission for the time you have given us tonight and for your consideration of our project. Throughout the whole process, every town commission, official, and staff member we have met with has been so welcoming, and it fills me with pride to know that West Hartford is so open to citizen participation and to ideas for positive change. The ultimate purpose of this resolution, and the purpose behind the greater climate movement, is to preserve our amazing quality of life and to ensure that all future generations enjoy the same life that we do. West Hartford should not be defined by hurricanes, floods, power outages, and hazy skies. This is the town of strolling downtown, biking around the reservoir, and walking to school with your friends. Above all, we want West Hartford to keep its unique character. We hope you see this resolution as a means to that end and choose to forward it to the Town Council for a vote next month. We now welcome any questions you might have about our resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, and Corinne for closing. Appreciate all of your work. As you hear and can see, a lot of thought and continued work and gathering of information has been a part of this group for a long time. I think there's even a graduation in there and some other things too. So, and it's pretty remarkable to stay connected and to be involved. I really, really am impressed by that. Corinne, that's really something. But I want to open it up for questions from my fellow colleagues. I'm not sure if they had as much time to dig into this yet, but Ms. Kerrigan or Mr. Gold? Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I just want to thank everybody for the presentation again, just to reiterate what Mayor Cantor had said. I think it speaks volumes as to what the next generations are looking to accomplish, move forward. I did have a question relative to the schools. As we're looking at it, we're talking about Conard and High School and Hall High. Obviously, there's other upper level schools in West Hartford. Has there been any outreach to those schools in terms of Northwest Catholic, Kingswood Oxford, and others in the area that might participate and be involved in something like this and potentially have representation and voting rights in the commission if it were to be established?
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Does anyone want to?
We have not reached out to any.
Could you just state your name for this is a video, because it's a video, we want to make sure that people can recognize.
Of course. This
thank
is Zoe Weissman to answer Councilman Gold's question. We have not made any contact with those schools at the moment. Our first priorities have been Hall and Conard, since those schools are made up primarily of West Hartford citizens and only West Hartford citizens. The issue with reaching out to those schools, while it'd be great to have representation, and I think hearing their perspective would definitely be a very valuable one, we are right now focused on West Hartford and the action we can create right here, and those schools accept students from other towns.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Gold, did you want to ask anything further?
Oh, at this point, thank you.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, how about presenting to the Mayor's Youth Council and talking with them about, that is a new council. I don't know if you have heard about it, but it is a new council that has been formed that does have some West Hartford representation from other schools. In fact, Mr. Gold's son, who is a student at Kingswood Oxford, is a part of that commission. So that might be a good way to engage some fellow students in your work. So just as a suggestion, the coordinator is through the youth librarian, their teen librarian, and we can get you the information for contact. So so we can go. Ms. Kerrigan, do you have any questions?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment. I'm feeling very hopeful about the future, knowing that Zoe and Andrew and Arlo and Evan and Isadora and Karina are involved the way that you're involved, really caring about a planet that, quite frankly, my generation did a shitty job. I mean, we did some good stuff, but clearly there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm just thankful that you're involved. And it gives me great hope. You obviously did your homework, very thorough presentation. And thank you for taking your time and your efforts and putting this forward. I certainly will support it, and I'm really pleased that you presented it to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Yeah, so we do have to talk about some elements of this before we recommend, because we do have to talk about it. I remember I had mentioned it to you about youth being on a commission because that is a little bit of a challenge for us, the way our bylaws are set up and the way the Connecticut state law is set up. And we need to do some research on how other communities are doing that. But I would expect that we also have an election, and there might be some changing party people on the council. We know there will be a couple. So I would say we probably need the November and December meeting flexibility to be able to work on it. So again, I appreciate all of your work and your patience. Do you have any more questions for us or anything further from my colleagues? Mr. Davidoff, I know that I didn't call on you, so I don't know if you had any comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had the opportunity to meet with these wonderful future leaders of our community. They're amazing. They were amazing this evening. They were amazing last Friday night when I talked to them. I didn't know that Karina was at William and Mary. That has a great place in my heart. My daughter graduated from there so very recently. And like I said, our generation is old, and as Councilor Kerrigan said, better ways of doing things are with you. So I think you can take it from the mayor and from Mr. Gold and Ms. Kerrigan that this will move forward, and we just have to work out some of these technical legal things to make it happen. But thank you for being present and for being stewards of our environment. It's really appreciated.
And I thank you so much. I just want to share an email that I got and something that I think that we can consider and maybe you can think about as well during these interim weeks as we wait for something further. But the one of the suggestions was tracking and supporting electricity, natural gas consumption, oil consumption, solar production, miles driven, gas consumed, and also updating a dashboard of metrics for town government, residents, and businesses. I'm not sure, this was a resident who emailed this, but one of the things that we've been talking about is making sure that we, one of the first things is educating our public. People are getting information from many different sources, don't necessarily have the same data. And we want to make sure that we are understanding the impact right here on, this decisions that we make. And so I think having some matrix, some information on dashboard developed over time. This isn't going to happen tomorrow, but figuring out how we do that and how people can become aware. If I choose to purchase an electric vehicle, what will that save? How will that help my community? If I choose to put solar panels on my house, what will that do? So those kinds of questions and so we will work on that. The same thing with as you talked about solid waste management. It's a big issue in the state. We are in a crisis of solid waste management. So some big decisions are going to be made as we haul trash out of state. What does that do to our environment? And what if we choose to compost or choose to get biodegradables out of our trash system? So again, we're going to need your voice for a lot of different decisions that we have going forward. So again, much appreciation. Thank you so much for being here. You're welcome to stay, but you don't have to. I get you're busy. I have a lot of work to do, but we are going to go to the next agenda item unless there's any more comments or questions on this. One more. All right. Again, thank you so much for all of your, I lost my agenda. I got bumped off my computer. Sorry. So again, thank you all so much, and we will be in touch. All right, we will go now to zoning ordinance discussion. This is residential parking and accessory dwelling unit standards. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. We have a number of staff attending tonight's virtual meeting. We've got Dwayne Martin, our Interim Director of Community Development, Todd Dumay, Town Planner, Tim McClochie, Building Official, Kristen Gorski, our Economic Development Coordinator. For this agenda item, that Mr. Dumay and I want to bring to your attention the fact that state law, looks like recent changes in state law are going to require some amendments to our zoning ordinances. So we want to have a chance to just briefly discuss it tonight for action at a future meeting. So Mayor, I would next call on Mr. Dumay through you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hart. Mr. Demay?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Todd Demay, Town Planner. As Mr. Hart indicated, the last general legislative session through Public Act 2129, which was signed into law, changed a number of elements to the zoning enabling legislation. As a reminder, we derive our local authority here in West Hartford to regulate development of land through zoning vis-a-vis the state general statutes. And I wanted to call the council's attention to two changes in particular, which I think are of interest to the council based on recent discussions we've had and also recent zoning ordinances that you've adopted. The first of those changes relates to a new imposition in the state statute regarding zoning regulations and the establishment of minimum residential parking standards. So the new language that was adopted essentially caps a community's ability to require parking that does not exceed a specified level for residential development. And the new language that was adopted in the state statute says that a community's zoning regulations or ordinances cannot require more than one parking space for each studio or one bedroom dwelling unit, or more than two parking spaces for each dwelling unit with two or more bedrooms, unless the municipality opts out of that provision. So they created a new standard in the state statutes, and they allow municipalities to go through an opt-out provision. The opt-out provision is essentially a public hearing in which the town's zoning commission would have to hold a public hearing and identify the reasons it's seeking to opt out. While it might not be apparent from the reading of that text alone, or for those that are unfamiliar with zoning or parking requirements, the intent of that provision, I believe, was to limit artificially high parking minimums that many municipalities around the state place on residential units in particular, and thus really try to curb the overconstruction of parking. As we're all aware, the construction of parking surplus has a number of associated negative impacts, including environmental impacts, loss of trees and vegetative cover, increased impervious coverage amounts, and also additional costs levied on development. So to understand what this means for West Hartford, we in the planning division looked at this residential parking requirement and tried to compare that to what we currently have. And our current standards in terms of residential requirements, for one family, we only require 2 parking spaces regardless of bedroom count. For 2 or more units in any multifamily building, we require 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. So in West Hartford, we have a standard that's based on the dwelling unit and not the bedroom count. So we're trying to compare apples to oranges in a sense. So what we did was to try to get a more direct comparison to equalize the per unit versus per bedroom calculation. Brian Pudlick did a great job of pulling all of the multifamily developments that the town has approved that have been constructed or that's totals 811 housing units through 13 different developments. Applying our parking standard for those 811 units, we get a required parking amount of about 1,200 parking spaces. If we utilize the state standard that was just adopted, that number would have been only 1,100, roughly 1,100 spaces. So we required about 100 more than the new state standard. Now that differs from the total amount of parking that was actually approved and or constructed, which is 1,300, because a developer can and oftentimes does propose more than our minimum requirements. And while on its surface, it might seem that the adoption or pursuing an adoption of the new state standard would reduce the amount of overall parking. If we looked at a project by project basis of those 13 developments, 8 of them would have required to provide more parking had the state standard been in place. And this is largely because the new parking requirements are highly volatile because they're based on bedroom counts. So if we have a few large projects that are mostly studios or 1 bedrooms, that's going to skew the number. So based on this research, if this is something the town is interested in pursuing, I think it would be a staff recommendation to adopt an ordinance that includes the new statutory language of requiring for multifamily dwellings 1 parking space for each studio or 1 bedroom dwelling unit, 2 spaces for each 2 bedroom or more, or 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit, whichever is less. That would then capture the intent of the state statute, also preserve our flexibility that allows us to right-size parking here, and at the end of the day, would require less parking depending on which formula you use. So I will pause there. I said a lot in a short amount of time. I'd be happy to answer any questions before I jump into the next topic.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Would this need a complete separate ordinance or to amend the ordinance for the ADU? It wouldn't be specific to the ADU ordinance. This would be, or would it? I mean, could it be an amendment to the ADU ordinance, or would it be?
So the ADU provision I'll speak about next, Mayor, and that would be an amendment to the recently adopted ADU provisions. And that one's even a little bit more interesting, and I'll explain why. This one would be essentially two amendments to our parking standards. So section 17732, a fairly minor amendment. And then we have one other outline parking standard in our zoning that falls in the traditional neighborhood design district, the T&D, that has a slightly different standard. So I would suggest applying this new language to anywhere where we require parking for residential units.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any other questions from counselors? Okay, so I guess continue on with the ADU ordinance, and then if there's more questions, we can address them.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So again, stemming from the same adoption of that Public Act 2129, there was a completely new standard, a new section created in the general statutes that actually requires communities to adopt accessory dwelling units within the statutory language. And within that document, it provided for certain standards that a community has to include when adopting accessory dwelling units within their zoning regulations. The language in the ordinance calls them accessory apartments, but for our purposes, it's the same thing. So it goes through a number of standards, and fortunately, for the most part, our recently adopted back in January 2021 new accessory dwelling unit ordinance largely tracks the requirements contained in the new statutory language very neatly. There's a couple of exceptions, and I'll talk about those in a moment. So the state statute creates this new standard where it says that a town has to adopt accessory dwelling unit or accessory apartment zoning ordinances that permit as of right accessory apartments in an identified zone in their community. It allows for communities to opt out if they're not interested. There's a public hearing process. There's very specific and prescribed procedures to opt out. And then there's what I would call a very unique clause that is essentially a do nothing clause. If a community does not either adopt new standards or amend any existing zoning ordinance standards that it has in place regarding accessory apartments, or does not opt out, whatever standards they have in place or lack of standards at that time become null and void, and the state standards and the enabling legislation take effect. So anyone in that community could apply for accessory dwelling units under the language contained in the state statutes. So those are kind of the three things related to accessory apartments. So if we circle back and look at its impact to what we as the council and the community just adopted for the creation of accessory dwelling unit standards, there's a couple of very minor conflicts between our adopted language and the new state statute that we'd have to correct. And that would require the forwarding of a new zoning ordinance amendment to address those changes. And there's the three conflicts I've identified are within the new statutory guidance. We are not allowed to establish a minimum floor area for a residential unit that doesn't exist in building or fire code. So our accessory dwelling unit standards say that an accessory dwelling unit must have a minimum gross floor area of at least 400 square feet. We also included a maximum of 800 square feet or 30% of the gross floor area of the dwelling, whichever is less. So we'd have to eliminate the minimum. And then the state statute, the new language in the state statute says you have to allow up to 1,000 square feet or 30%. So we'd have to go from 800 to 1,000. So that's the first conflict. The second conflict relates to building footprint or coverage. So the new statutory language says that if you're adopting accessory dwelling unit standards or modifying them, that you can't require lot coverage greater than or equal to that which is required for the principal dwelling. Again, our standard had a provision that if someone is going to create an accessory dwelling unit, couldn't increase the footprint of that principal dwelling or the new ADU by more than 30%. So we'd have to eliminate that. But we could leave in place our underlying coverage limitations. That would not conflict. So that would be a relatively minor change. And then the next change that we would have to address is a relatively minor change. The new Public Act, it says that you cannot adopt zoning that requires an exterior door for any accessory dwelling unit or apartment, except as that which might be required under applicable building or fire code. Our local ordinance says that exterior access shall be provided to accessory dwelling units and shall be located on the side or rear of the dwellings. So we'd have to eliminate the requirement to provide exterior access if we want to be consistent with the statute. So those are the three changes I've identified that put our recently adopted ADU ordinance in conflict with the new statutory language.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Any questions from my fellow counselors? Mr. Gold.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
And him.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you,
sorry
Beth.
about
I'll call on you after.
Sorry.
Mr. Gold first.
Yeah, thank you, Todd, for the in-depth analysis. I'm just trying to kind of wrap my whole head around it. So in effect, the ADU process that we went through before really was an exercise that was going to be put into place anyways by the state on the state level to give us the option of doing it or not doing it based on the state requirements, not based on what we felt was appropriate then for our town. Is that kind of where we are in terms of our decisions now?
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Dumais.
Mr. Gold, through you, Madam Mayor, if I understood the question correctly, so we adopted and began our process before this process or change was even pushed forward at the state level. So I think we went through and adopted what we thought made sense for the community. The state, after we adopted ours, went through a process and adopted this language that would apply, a blanket to the entire state and every community. But largely, if you look at it section by section or standard by standard, it somewhat appears that the state model standards were set in part the way that we structured ours. So they're very closely related. But if we want to maintain at least the integrity of what we did locally, we would have to make some changes. If we don't, and we don't opt out, which would mean that we would not allow accessory dwelling units anywhere in town, then we default to the exact language that's contained in Public Act 2129, Section 6.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Anything further, Mr. Gold?
Yes. So I just want to be clear. So we're kind of reopening the judgment, so to speak, from a legalese standpoint, and we'll be looking to have potentially another discussion probably after the election then as to ADUs in our town again with the amendments or not having them at all again if we opt out. Is that what I'm hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Dumais? I'm not sure if that.
Yes, I think that's correct, Councilor Gold. Given the council's action in adopting the ordinance, finding it consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development to provide a diversity of housing types and costs, provide increased accessibility of housing options, and all of the other stated reasons in the adoption, you'd have to go through that same process again, knowing that it was just adopted. Our options now are modify what we just did slightly to comply, or completely opt out and not allow them at all, or do nothing and then we allow them by default through the enactment of the state language anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Anything further, Mr. Gold?
No, thank you. Thank you, Todd.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation. Two questions. I'll put them both out there, then you can answer them. I was a little confused about the exterior door. So are you saying without the exterior door requirement that the ADU can be connected to the house? And then if not, just explain the exterior door, side versus. And then the other question is, when we determine a maximum of 800 square feet on our ordinance, where did we come up with that 800 square feet? And just sort of a personal perspective, the 1,000 square foot, do you see that being a huge issue, an additional 200 square feet?
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Dumais?
Madam Mayor, through you to Councilor Kerrigan. So I'll take up the second part of your question first, and that is the 800 square feet. We determined that number from applying the 30% of the principal dwelling unit. So you get about a median of 800 square feet if we look at the housing inventory in West Hartford and take what's 30% of the median square foot house, it's about 800 square feet. So that seemed to be a logical number to kind of land upon if we were going to do a 30% of the principal dwelling unit. So an increase from 800 to 1,000, that's perhaps something we can discuss at a future meeting when we kind of take a look at this again. And again, keep in mind, this was adopted with the entire state in mind. So that standard may be 1,000 square feet in other communities. I'd have to go back and look at the legislative history and why 1,000 was picked. So I don't really have a clear answer, moving from 800 to 1,000, what that would necessarily do to an ADU, other than make it larger. And then the first question you asked about the exterior doors. So obviously, if it was a detached accessory dwelling unit, which is permitted, so it's a structure that's not connected to the principal dwelling, it would have to have an exterior door. You couldn't access it otherwise without some kind of elaborate tunneling system. So if we're talking about an accessory dwelling unit that's created through the expansion or the internal rearrangement of space within a principal dwelling or a home, what the new statutory language says is you can't require its own entrance in and out through the exterior. So you could have an internal connection in that scenario, or you could just have a separate vestibule area within the building, and each of them have their own access points inside of the building. It just says we can't require an exterior door.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Ms. Kerrigan, is that anything further? Ms. Kerrigan, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Make sure you're off.
I know.
Yeah.
My finger, I kept pressing
Yeah,
unmute, but didn't unmute. No, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I do have a question. Is there anybody that has applied for ADU that would be kind of either put on hold or impacted by this change? And when is everything effective, I guess, and how the timing of all?
Sure, great question. So we've approved 4 accessory dwelling unit applications since the new ordinance went into effect, I guess at the end of January after its adoption. All 4 of them would be unimpacted by any of the amendments discussed under the state standards, because if we peel back each of them, I would say they are more permissive than what our local ordinance required. So this would basically allow for more flexibility in the creation of the ADU standards than we currently have adopted. So theoretically, Madam Mayor, it could allow for more applications under an increased flexible standard.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais and Mayor Cantor again. Would it be important for us to go back to them with, I don't know if any of them were at that maximum 800, to make sure that if they wanted 1,000, they were, kind of on that path? Or should we be circling back with them and making sure that they have an update?
So circling back, I would say no. 3 of the 4 are at least in or nearly completed construction. All of those 3, most of them were less than 500 square feet by design, by choice, and they were what we would consider, and it was something the council was very interested in at the time, of creating what we would commonly refer to as in-law apartments. And they were specifically created in each instance to have elderly family members move back in with families. And those were all roughly, like I said, 400 to 500 square feet with no design intent to go larger. The most recently approved one is a little bit more than that, about 600 square feet. but it's again for the elderly family members to move back in. And it was designed to fill in existing space over existing structure in the house. So there wasn't a design intent to expand. So I don't think we'd need to notice any of the approved applicants of the change. But going forward, certainly someone could take advantage.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. All right, Mr. Gold.
Sorry, just one quick follow-up when we were talking about the state. And I know we were talking about the ADUs in the past relative to affordable housing. Have we looked into whether or not they would qualify under the 10% requirement that the state is looking for per town, and whether or not the ADUs would fall under that?
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Gold. So 1030 G.
Madam Mayor, through you to Councilor Gold. They would not count, Councilor Gold. So the creation of ADUs largely is consistent with the creation of what we call little a affordable or naturally occurring affordable, meaning that due to their smaller size, they typically command, if they are put up for rental prices, lower rents than other market rate product. However, it doesn't preclude someone from deed restricting an ADU. So the only way for an ADU to count towards a community's 10% 830G requirement is if that unit is deed restricted, income restricted, based on qualifying standards, and then it would count. So that could be a choice, but that's not something that's proposed to be required under the ordinances, nor do I think it's permissible to do.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Any further comments, questions? Okay, well, we will, I'm assuming that we're going to have more discussion on this and the ordinance before we put it on a council agenda, especially with potentially some changes at the table. So, Mr. Dumais.
Madam Mayor, I just realized I did not answer part of your question. So you had asked when that the ordinance becomes effective.
Yes,
So,
thank you.
thank you. The new ADU provisions become effective January 2022. Now, the penalties that I discussed in terms of if we don't opt out or if we do nothing, that does not become effective until January of 2023. So we essentially have a year before we either just amend our ordinances to comply or go through an opt-out provision. If we don't do that by 2023, the state standard would become the town standard.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. Okay. Let's see. So we will go to the next agenda item. And again, I'm signed out. And that is the youth. Oh my goodness, it has no time on this thing. It's the Showcase Young Professionals and Enhancing their small business. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. We put this on the agenda at the request of Councilor Gold. He's had an opportunity to discuss this in some detail with Ms. Gorski and others. And I know you, Mayor, and other council members have a strong interest in this as well. And we've done some good things in recent years. But probably would be best to recognize Councilor Gold just to flesh out his thoughts in a little more detail. And then Ms. Gorski could add her comments.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Mr. Hart, and through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, no, this was a concept and idea that Kristen was very helpful in discussion with moving forward to showcase young professionals in town, but create more of a young professional hub coming and stemming from West Hartford and kind of branching out through the community. Kristen and I were able to connect with Chris Conway over at the Chamber, trying to use their resources with 2,900 participants and members to kind of get young entrepreneurs, young professionals motivated and keeping them active in our community and attracting others to our community. And I think this would be an opportunity. What we came up with, and Chuck Corsi was involved in the most recent meeting that we had to showcase some young professionals who are graduates of Hall, Conard, and local areas here, and showing the community in Greater Hartford and beyond really what West Hartford has to offer and how we can attract business back into West Hartford from some of the graduates of our local schools. So that was really the impetus, the beginning process. Kristen and I have been working on it with the chamber. I think Kristen's been great helping to push it forward and get it to gain some legs. And I think this would be beneficial to our town and really the greater Hartford community and beyond. So I'll throw it over to you, Kristen. Didn't want to steal some of your thunder, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. I actually have been texting you and Miss Kerrigan. I actually have to leave. So Mr. Gold, because Miss Kerrigan's on audio, I think it's going to be a little bit challenging for her to chair. So if you don't mind taking over the chair, we will go to Ms. Gorski, and I will be signing off in just a couple minutes so you can take over staff reports. And I appreciate that very much.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Kristen Gorski, Economic Development Coordinator. Mr. Gold, feel free to steal all the thunder you want. So no, I think that you summed it up perfectly. And just to let the committee know that we do have some anticipated next steps. So it really was, figuring out how, what we're doing, figuring out where we go next in terms of how to, really increase retention as well as recruitment for young professionals to West Hartford. So beyond what Mr. Gold had mentioned, there are some state programs coming down the pike that we think we can piggyback on. CT for Me, which is focused on retention of young professionals. Campus CT, which is a new initiative coming out of Advanced CT, which is really going to be focused on the retention of college students post-graduation. And there's also some additional initiatives in that realm coming out of the Alliance that we'll learn about soon. But what we are going to do next is we're going to add a young professionals page to the Y West Hartford website. So we actually had a great meeting this morning of our ad hoc committee, and we talked about how we would execute that. In fact, the chamber, through their young professionals group, they don't mind my cat meowing in the background, sorry. Through their young professionals group, they have an event actually next week in Blueback Square where they're inviting in other young professionals groups from the state, and West Hartford Community Interactive is actually going to go take a video of that event and ask some of the young professionals there, why they love West Hartford. So that will be showcased on the website. We'll also add, some information to housing options, demographics, stuff like that. So everything that Mr. Gold had mentioned will start to plug into that resource.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I think it is going to be tremendous to attract, and I think I'm very hopeful that this will gain some significant legs and keep moving forward. So I look forward to continuing to work with you on this and moving it and pushing it forward. Is there any questions, comments from anybody else? Beth, if you're there, or Mr. Davidoff? Okay. Seeing none, we can move on.
Lee, I'm sorry.
Yes.
My little mute button is so tiny.
Okay.
I just think it's a great idea. I mean, it's just fabulous. I'm excited, and it's needed, and it's creative. I think it fits a need. We need to keep youth here, and this is a great way to do it. So thank you So Lee, was this your idea or?
Yes. So
Kudos to you. It's a great idea, and thank you. I mean, Kristen always gets things done, whatever it is. She's a get done type person. So thank you both. I think it's great.
She certainly is a can-do type of person, so I appreciate that. Without any other comments, I guess we'll go to staff reports and going right back to you, Kristen, with economic development.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Gold. Again, Kristen Gorski, Economic Development Coordinator. So I had put together a brief report that I've been putting together for, probably over a year now. So I'll run through some highlights in terms of new leasing activity, as well as some businesses that are either currently building out or have recently opened. So just some highlights. Gillette Wines, this is a second location for them. They are, I believe, in Avon. They have just signed a lease in the backside of the Big Y Plaza and are excited to join our community. Rasham Marketplace on Farmington Avenue, they continue to build out their location there. It's a second location from South Windsor, and they will be serving Afghan food, which is really exciting because we don't have that cuisine here in West Hartford. Aroma Body and Spa, they recently opened in the Central Building and are doing incredibly well. Pink Flamingo Company, they are going to be opening within the next couple weeks at 1001 Farmington Avenue. So they do party supplies, a lot of large balloon displays for social media, and come with quite a following. So they're excited to join our community as well. Recent announcement, the cozy space that's been vacant for well over 2 years. Recently, there was an executed lease with a business that will be called El Santo. And so that is going to be a second location for the restaurateurs who own Frida down in Elmwood. So excited to see them expand in town. Zephyr Street Pizza recently opened. Kung Fu Tea, they're hoping to open on South Main Street before the end of the year. Some of us had an opportunity to go to the Next Chapter. Their grand opening was a couple weeks ago, so they're open on weekdays now, and that's a collaboration with the West Hartford Public Schools. The Russell in 39 South Main Street, they should be opening soon. So Caribbean food, the owner actually is a West Hartford resident and is very excited to bring his food to town. Toro Mexican Street Foods, they also recently opened. They are on Raymond Road. So that was the former Petals and Paws. That property looks fantastic. So really nice to see some good activity there. And as we move next door, some news that was recently announced, but we've been working on for a very long time. So Liquid Nirvana has purchased the abutting property, which is the former Washburn's property on Raymond Road. So they, as an introduction to the community, they did some cleanup of that property as well as did a mural on the building there. So more to come down the pike about their plans in order to open a Liquid Nirvana at that location. But again, great to see 2 longtime vacant properties and honestly somewhat blighted properties have really great activity there. Crow Accounting, we had met with them earlier this week. So this is a significant accounting firm that relocated from Simsbury. So they are in the former Burgess space in Blueback Square. So they have 65 employees that they brought with them. So super excited to have them here. Suburban Pharmacy, they're currently building out in the former Ooh La La space in Blueback. Solid Core recently opened at the corner of Memorial and Isham. 0 Degree Ice Cream, she is working on obtaining her final permits in order to complete build out at her new location on Park Road. So that's 274 Park Road in the Fuller Yoga space. So she, just keep in mind, she had been here several years ago in what is now the Nashville Hot Chicken place at 120 Park Road, but she's excited to come back to our community. Fuego Picante also opened on Park Road last month. The Gold Rock announced that they were closing, but very quickly announced that they had been purchased by a local gentleman who will be opening an IHOP in that location. The council's aware of the next one, Floor and Decor. You recently approved a special development district amendment. So as we understand it, that was to make way for continued negotiations and hopefully an execution of a lease for that tenant. So we're still waiting for confirmation on that, but as we understand it, it is still full steam ahead. In the former East West Grill on New Park Avenue, Sunrise Country Kitchen, they're working on doing some minor improvements to the building there, and they will be opening, so they'll be serving breakfast and lunch, and they were the previous owners of Fiddleheads in Hartford. AutoZone is well underway. A couple doors down, Weehaw Brewing opened a couple weeks ago. They're doing great. That property also looks fantastic. Harcon, they are working on an expansion at 114 Shield Street. So this is also on the property sales. They had purchased 114 Shield Street back in August. So they are our fourth largest manufacturer. So they manufacture aerospace components, and they purchased the property in order to do a pretty sizable expansion. So they'll be opening in about 20,000 square feet of space in that property. So excited to see them expand in town. Mark's Appliance Warehouse, they are wrapping up their build out at 80 South Street. They've been on Prospect Avenue for a long time in about 2,500 square feet of space, and their new property on South Street, which they purchased, is closer to 8,000 square feet of space. So a great expansion. Couple additional items. Hot Table Tavern in the Square, both in Corbin's Corner. They continue to build out. Both are hoping to open Hot Table likely before the end of the year, and then Tavern in the Square sometime, hopefully in the spring. And they also recently signed the final lease in the Shake Shack building. So that will be for IV Rehab, so a local physical therapist expanding into West Hartford. So with that last lease, that property will be fully tenanted. And then one additional, you would think it would be a restaurant. It's not. It's a retailer. Box Lunch is a new lease that was signed in the former Pink Space in the West Farms Mall. So very quickly, I'll just run through a couple of these property sales, and then I'm happy to take any questions should you have any. So 766 Farmington Avenue, that was sold last month to Sunny Chen LLC. So he hopes to be able to relocate Black Bamboo there. He is currently leasing his space on Farmington Avenue and was able to purchase this property. So town staff is working with him to try and iron out everything to hopefully move that forward. 24 Custer Street, that also sold, still trying to figure out exactly who purchased that. So hopefully I can bring that to the next committee meeting. This 80 South Street, that's Mark's Appliance that I had already mentioned. 318 Newington Road, was sold to M&G Landscaping. So they're in Weathersfield. So I believe that this will be a relocation for them. The 114 Shield Street is Harcon, and then lastly is IHOP, which we touched upon. So that's my report in terms of business activity. I'll pause and take questions, and then I have one additional minor update for the committee.
Questions from the committee?
I'm
I
good.
just want to make sure. I'm sorry, Beth, go ahead.
Oh, I said I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to make sure, was that everything, Kristen? Or, I mean, there was a lot there.
Yes. So
as I was counting, it looked like about 26 pieces of business that are flourishing in the town. And I'm very optimistic as we are, as we're lifting the mask mandate soon and moving into some form of normalcy. It's very assuring to me that we're moving towards some business activity. And I think this is probably one of the more extensive lists that I've seen and heard from in a long time. So thank you. Mr. Davidoff, do you have any questions?
Yes, through you, Mr. Gold, to Manager Hart. We had a discussion about the Gold Rock property and the graffiti that was present from the highway view. Has that been addressed?
Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your question. Not entirely discussing that with the police, and actually we have a discussion going on at the staff level as to how to best address graffiti moving forward. Historically, the police have taken action initially, and then it's been a combination of either zoning or the health district. But we will follow through on that particular complaint and iron out our process moving forward. Oh, Mr. Gold, I think you muted yourself.
Can you hear me? Okay. Anything else, Mr. Davidoff?
No, thank you. Awesome.
Nothing further. We can move on to staff report. Oh, sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Gold, I just wanted to first say very briefly regarding, your comments. Yeah, it's exciting. There's construction fences everywhere. So I touched upon a lot of business, but no, there's also a lot of larger, commercial and multifamily construction projects going on, and that's very unique to the state. So a lot of really great activity that's been pushed forward through all staff on this call. So, we also are getting back down to pre-pandemic vacancy rates. And so really we're at the point where it's a good problem to have, but trying to find actual storefronts to be able to get new businesses in. So again, good problem to have, but really great amount of activity. Last item that I'll mention, and then I'll be done, is I know a couple of the council members were able to stop by the job fair that we had at the end of last month, which honestly feels like it was like 6 months ago at this point in time, but it was wildly successful. It was the first time we had ever taken anything like that on. So it was a joint effort between the town of West Hartford and the West Hartford Chamber. So all in all, we had 40 businesses who attended to have booths there. That included 5 of what we call resource organizations, Capital Workforce Partners, American Job Center, FAVAR, Features Incorporated, and West Hartford Adult Education. So we did that intentionally so that businesses who had booths there or wanted to visit could interface with those organizations, because they can help also staff and be able to place people who they're working with in these businesses as employees. They also have a bunch of really great resources in addition to that. So overall, we had over 150 attendees to the event over the course of 4 hours. Some of the attendees were hired on the spot. There were a lot of feedback that we heard, that there were many attendees who actually had interviews afterwards and were hired after the event, some at the managerial level, some nurses, and really it transcends all fields. So we had a wide variety of people who attended, a lot of diversity, young professionals, people who were senior in their career. And so just walking away from it, the question was, have you done this before? How many times have you done it before? When are you going to do it again? So gearing up to hopefully replicate that in the spring, but certainly we'll keep the council apprised of that. And I am done.
Thank you very much. And I was there, saw firsthand, and I think it was a great event. And I think I was one of the ones asking you when it was going to do it again. So I think it was highly successful and definitely beneficial to our community and the businesses that we support and support us. So without further ado, we'll move to staff reports. 4B, community development. I think that's Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Councilor Gold. This is Dwayne Martin, Acting Director of Community Development and Town Engineer. So I'm just going to highlight a few projects, but I'm happy to answer any questions on those particular or any other projects that you have in mind. So the first one I'm happy to announce, I've mentioned this before, but happy to announce that we're actually physically starting the construction of Troutbrook Trail Phase 5. As a reminder, that section runs from Fern Street down to Farmington Avenue. There is a construction entrance that has been created off of Troutbrook Drive between those two major roadways, Fern and Farmington, and the physical construction of the trail is planned to start next week. So you're going to see a lot of activity out there. Our hopes is that we'll be able to get as much done this construction season before winter really sets in. Ideally, even pave it so that people can use it through the winter. I've even warned Public Works that they may need to plow it, but we'll see how progress goes forward, and it should be done in the springtime, regardless of the winter impact. So happy to mention that. Second item is, if you've driven Boulevard near 4 Mile, Newport, Riggs, there are some physical changes going on there to address some lingering traffic safety issues. So specifically at the intersection of Boulevard and 4 Mile, you'll notice the construction of what we call semi-diverters. We were testing these out with orange construction barrels. Now it's been permanently installed there with positive results to date. So moving forward, there's some pavement markings that need to be added to that intersection, and then those will be done. Moving forward, we're looking to install 2 permanent semi-diverters on Newport Avenue for similar reasons and in similar fashion. One will be located down by Cedric Road. The other will be located at the intersection with Ellsworth Road, hoping to have those installed also before winter hits. And then lastly, we are now testing semi-diverters at the intersection of Boulevard and Riggs. And we're hoping that that will also be successful and that that'll limit or be the end or conclusion to the traffic safety issues in that general area. So fingers crossed, we're planning on doing that test or trial, if you will, at Boulevard and Riggs through the winter time, and then reporting back to the town manager our recommendations, and then moving forward from there, of course, keeping the neighborhood apprised of any changes. The third and very important item to mention is we have completed the third drainage study, and we are going to conduct a virtual public information meeting for the residents that were contained within that drainage study, which we're calling areas 4, 5, and 6. The meeting is scheduled for October 26th between the hours of 6 and 8. We mailed out approximately 2,000 notices to residents of those areas to make them aware. And because of recent storm events, not surprisingly, we have been getting a lot of questions and comments, mostly in the form of phone calls. So again, that public information meeting is planned to be virtual on October 26th from 6 to 8. Our consultant will do a brief presentation and then open it up for questions. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention is we are hiring a new full-time civil engineer too, which is the replacement of a retirement in the office, which couldn't come any sooner with regards to all of our flooding complaints. So I'm happy to report we'll be back at full staff. That new person is slated to start on November 8th. So soon. Open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any questions from the committee? Ms. Kerrigan here.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Davidoff, I see you're shaking your head. Thank you very much. One quick question relative to the safety dividers on Riggs and Newport and area. In terms of plowing when we have snow, is that something that you've anticipated on how to manage and go forward with?
Thank you, Councilor Gold. Yes, Dwayne Martin. We've been interacting with Public Works throughout this process and informing them that they're going to be installed. They did deploy the semi-diverters through the winter, so they were plowing around them and they had to go out and shovel some of the sidewalk ramps. There were a couple tweaks, if you will, that were implemented because of some challenges related to one of the residential driveways nearby, but that went well. And obviously it's not a wall. I mean, there's a curb there now, but they'll be able to plow up on top of those areas. It's just the sidewalk areas will need to be cleaned. So, but we did anticipate that. Good question. Thank you.
Any other further questions? We'll move on to staff reports for C. Town Manager, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Matt Hart, Town Manager. I do not have much additional to add. I'd like to thank staff members for their good and thorough reports, and for the councilors for the good discussion this evening. Just to elaborate on the transit-oriented development zoning initiative, we would like to present a draft ordinance or something close to it to the committee at, I believe, your November 18th meeting. I did discuss that with the mayor, and that would be the new committee, just assuming you retain the current schedule. But we would like to get that going late November, early December at the latest.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Ms. Kerrigan?
Thank you.
Mr. Davidoff? Thank you, Mr. Hart, for that information. Moving on, any future agenda items that we would, aside from the TOD zoning that we anticipate to be put on, anything else requested by the committee? Without hearing any, I would move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second. Thank you.
Thank you all for everything. I appreciate you bearing with me in my first time as a chair temporarily. Hopefully we can have more time. So
You did
thank
great.
you for being part of this committee. I think this is our last one I should have mentioned this before, but this is our last one. It's been great to be part of. I thank Beth and our mayor for being part of it and helping me through it. Kristen, Matt, Dwayne, Todd, And Tim, I haven't gotten to know you that well, but we'll hopefully continue on. And Leon, thank you for showing your face most of the time. I appreciate it. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.